it? I did wonder if I should do a We Feel Your Pain about Jay Rayner, as I've done so about Ian Dale, Mark Commode, Taylor Swift and Andrew Neil. I'd love to. I was super keen. I discussed it with my production team, but they said Jay isn't a big enough name. He didn't make the cut. The responses to Jay Rayner's tweets are interesting. He had some support from his loyalists, but here's what others had to say. This is from the North Ace, who says, your tweet says a lot about you. Beverly, what a narrow and snide view you hold. I love GB News. Eggman, Mr. Rayner has no idea of the number of alternative views appearing on TV. And Piers Morgan, what a pompous arse. Well, there you go. Now, the brilliant American author and self-help guru Dale Carnegie once said, nobody kicks a dead dog. So these attacks are motivated by something, and it seems they're motivated by a desire to see us fail. And why would that be? Perhaps it's because we're a British news channel that actually likes Britain. Perhaps it's because we dare to think that Brexit brings with it, yes, challenges, but opportunities too. And the majority of people voted for Brexit to happen, so we should honour that. And I say that as someone who voted Remain. Perhaps it's because we've dared to question the COVID narrative. Our faces have been covered, £500 billion has been borrowed, and schools, playgrounds and GP surgeries have been chained shut. So we're entitled to ask whether that was a good idea or not. This place offers an alternative approach, an alternative tone, and an alternative point of view. And it's something that these arrogant bullies don't want you to have. Now, we won't always get it right, and I'll be honest, we've been through more sound engineers than Hugh Hefner's been through young actresses. What is most interesting is the desire by these characters to lie about our channel. They deliberately mischaracterize the place, and they do it all the time. Let's remind ourselves of that Mitch Benn tweet. And there you go. He says, oh, look, 13. Only 13 Conservative comedians on the circuit. So he's calling all of the people on that poster Conservatives. It's very confusing, considering several of the people featured in that image include Ian Stone, Rona Cameron, Sir Gila Kershey and Steve N. Allen, famous lefties. It doesn't fit the narrative, does it? But there you have it. I'd love to reply to Mitch Benn's tweet, particularly as he's an old friend that I've known for almost 30 years. But I can't reply to Mitch Benn because he's blocked me. That's nice, isn't it? You see, these people don't want to engage. They don't want to talk. They don't want to debate. Mitch Benn is clearly not a fan of Brexit, fair enough, and he is to the left politically, which is why I extend a warm invitation to him to appear on Headliners, because I want all perspectives on my shows, but I won't hold my breath. That said, he's a regular on Times Radio, so he could clearly do with the work. It's interesting because when you stand up to these bullies, their whole argument collapses like a house of cards. Our on-air and off-air talent come from all backgrounds, all races, ages, creeds, social class, and political point of view. For every former UKIP leader Nigel Farage, there is ex-Labour MP Gloria De Piero. For the record, let me share my political position. People often ask, well, I'm neither left nor right. I'm a liberal. And like so many of you, I feel politically homeless. This place is arguably the most diverse channel in the country in all senses of the word. So what motivates us here at GB News? What is our agenda? Well, we want to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. Most importantly, we want to hear what you think. We want to help you think. And we don't want to tell you what to think. In the end, we're not answerable to any celebrity, any journalist, or any politician. We're answerable to you. That is the GB News guarantee. This place is for you, it's about you, and it belongs to you. And it always will be. And just for the record, we're not going anywhere. With me tonight, reacting to the big stories of the day, is my amazing panel. Comedian Dick Nixon. Dick Nixon, there you go. That's a spoonerism if ever I heard one. Nick Dixon, there we are. And two other tongue twisters. Christine Hamilton, broadcaster and author, of course, and leader of the UK Independence Party, former Conservative MP, Neil Hamilton. Wonderful to have all three of you with us. Neil, if I could start with you, do you think that critics of GB News have an agenda?
Oh, of course they've got an agenda. They wear it on their sleeves, don't they? But I think you should take that sort of response as a compliment. For most of my political life, my principal objective has been to wind up the demented left and give them apoplexy wherever possible. And you seem to be doing that very well simply by existing. So I think this is all great. I think it's fundamentally a sense of insecurity on their part. They won't engage with you because they're not sure that they can actually raise the intellectual level to defeat your arguments. So puerile abuse is all that they're capable of.
Nick Dixon, what's your reaction to the likes of Jay Rayner and the comedian Mitch Ben in relation to their comments about GB News?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we got really attacked on Twitter recently for headliners, just for it existing, which is basically a balanced, light-hearted newspaper review show, which prior to 2016 or definitely 2010 would be an absolute non-story. It would just be a nice show you could watch if you wanted. But they all went crazy. I have it all muted, luckily, because I'm trying to create an echo chamber on my Twitter. But GB News is definitely not an echo chamber. As you say, on headliners, we have loads of lefties. We have Steve Allen from the MASH report. We have hardcore lefty Ian Stone. We probably have, on balance, about equal left and right, or even slightly left. So it doesn't really make sense. And even Catherine Ryan, who I like Catherine, she's a mainstream comedian. She's on all the shows that some people might call woke. They surely like Catherine Ryan, but she was on GB News the other day. So I'm a bit confused about what the rules are on who is evil and why. I'd like to see the list on that.
Christine, you have faced, haven't you, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in the world of showbiz and politics. What do you make of these attacks?
Oh, it's pathetic. It really is pathetic, and I'm surprised that somebody like Jay Rayner, he doesn't need to do it. He doesn't need to be so offensive. What's happened to good old-fashioned courtesy? Just say no, thank you. But don't you think it's because they are worried? Because everybody tried to pull GB News down when it first started, and you did have the little bit of a problem to start with some sort of funny lighting and things went a bit wrong. But of course, in a fledgling, it's a big operation back there. But I think now they are getting worried because you're clearly here to stay and they don't like it. So they can only resort to their version of vulgar abuse. Can I just say one thing, though? Can I pick you up on something? I'm sorry about this, but you said to everybody that they should celebrate with a glass of something French. Settle down with a glass of something French. We have boycotted France ever since Mr. Macron started to be so ridiculous about Brexit. So could they please not open French? Could they open anything else? South African, Argentinian, everything else. Spanish, Italian.
What about English?
What about English?
Some English sparkling wine would be good. If you don't mind, I'll pass on the New Zealand wine for the time being, given its current leadership. I mean, Neil, I wonder whether you think that there is an increasing mood of censorship around the media.
Oh, definitely. The received wisdom of the left is something which doesn't tolerate any dissent. This is the extraordinary thing. All these metropolitan liberals, as they like to think of themselves, are actually highly authoritarian in the way that they think of the world, and people like us are just not allowed to express our views. That's what the whole cancel culture is about, of course. It's cultural Marxism, which has many manifestations. And I think that this, as I said a moment ago, is a sign of intellectual weakness on their part. They don't feel that actually they can defeat our arguments. And if we're entertaining as well, that's even worse for them, of course, because these people are not entertaining. So many so-called comedians have the greatest difficulty in raising a laugh, in my experience. So I think GB News is doing a great service to diversity in the British media. And we certainly need something which is going to shake things up. The broadcast media in Britain is pathetic in the uniformity of views and the mindset, or certainly of those who run these channels. And so this is why we need competition. And
yes.
The only people who are afraid of competition are those who think that they're going to ultimately lose their audience or lose their jobs.
And Christine, what's the best way to tackle this censorship, do you think? What do you do with people that speak out against platforms like GB News, or Neil Young, the rock star who's trying to get the free speech comedian and presenter Joe Rogan cancelled from Spotify. How do you deal with these people?
Well, you ignore them, basically. That's what you do with silly people. Actually, I mean, I'm very conflicted about the Neil Young thing because I love his music. And now somebody else, I forget her name now, has just done this.
Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell, that's right. Which is such a shame. Live and let live. Everybody has a right to their view, and it's utterly ridiculous. And as you mentioned earlier, I think all this pulling down of statues and cancel culture that goes on at universities and various books can't be read and goodness knows what. I mean, to me, it's absolutely anathema. I was brought up to, if you've got something to say, speak up and speak it loud, speak your mind. And we always had healthy debate at home, and my mother was brought up like that. And I just find it incredible that all these snowflakes can't cope with a bit of competition. I'm sorry about Jay Rayner, because I enjoy his... I shan't mention it, let's not give him the oxygen. He has quite a good programme on a certain radio channel, which I do enjoy every week, but I shall actually now listen to it. Well, I might go and stick pins in my eyes instead.
Please don't do that. Listen, we've got a really busy and lively 3 hours to come. Neil Hamilton, Christine Hamilton and Nick Dixon reacting to the big stories of the day. Before 10 o'clock, we'll have a look at the first Tory MP who has thrown his hat into the ring for any potential leadership election. Tom Tugendhat is an ex-military hero. He wants to be our next Prime Minister. How soon will that come? Well, Neil will have strong views, given that he is a former Conservative MP. So we'll do that before 10. But after this is going to be fascinating. In the light of a row between Damon Albarn and Taylor Swift, we'll be asking in our big question, is modern music rubbish? And have your say. Our poll is currently running on Twitter at GBNews. Lots to get through. Keep your opinions coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
In response to my big opinion monologue, this is from Dam, who says, "Dear Mark, GB News is the best news programme in the UK by far. If there was a choice, I would pay to watch GB News, but wouldn't pay for BBC in chocolate buttons." Well, look, thanks very much for your kind words on that one, Dam. Connor in Belfast. "Good evening, Mark," says Connor. "I love GB News because it's an open house with all views considered and debated. Good to see the Hamiltons. Neil's a great fella. And Christine is a national treasure. Isn't she just?" Well, Connor, thanks very much for your email and for watching the show. Now, this week, the Blur singer Damon Albarn apologised to pop superstar Taylor Swift for accusing her of not writing her own songs. In a wide-ranging and fascinating interview, the Park Life hitmaker was critical of the way in which songs are written in the current era, often featuring enormous teams of writers, producing, in his view, lifeless and generic output. This comes in the same week that music guru and Spice Girls creator Simon Fuller launches a brand new supergroup. Here they are. This very well marketed and aesthetically pleasing band are called Future X, and they will be hitting the charts in the weeks to come. So does Damon Albarn have a point about the way in which songs are written these days? And do the likes of Adele, Ed Sheeran, Kanye West and others match up to the golden era of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, Aretha Franklin and Elton John? Well, that's tonight's big question. Is modern music rubbish? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome Tom Cridland, musician and host of the very popular Greatest Musicians of All Time podcast, which features interviews with the biggest names in rock and pop. I'm also joined by Elton John's former lyricist on massive hits like Blue Eyes, Little Genie and Part-Time Love, songwriting legend Gary Osborne. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Gary, if I could start with you, do you think that modern music matches up to the classics of the past?
Some does, some doesn't. It's always been like that. In the days when the great songs were being written, there was also a lot of rubbish being written. We just don't hear it now. So there's good stuff, there's bad stuff. You mentioned Adele, Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, all excellent. But so I disagree with Damon about Taylor Swift. And I disagree with them about people who write in teams, as long as they're teams of maybe 2 or 3. But it has got totally out of hand. I mean, some of the great writers, George Gershwin wrote with his brother Ira. Richard Rodgers wrote with Hammerstein and Hart. Elton writes with Bernie. McCartney wrote with Damon. I mean, it's a great way of doing it. You've got a sounding board. You've got someone to take charge of the lyrics, someone to take charge of the music, the responsibility. It is an ideal way.
Now, we've just lost Gary Osborne. We'll reconnect to him very shortly. Gary, we'll come back to you. We just lost you there. The lyricist has had the words taken out of his mouth. I'll come back to you, Gary, whilst we re-establish a line. Let me go to you, Tom. What are your thoughts about how modern artists compose music compared to back in the day?
Well, I have to say I agree wholeheartedly with Gary, whose work I'm a big fan of. I'm particularly a fan of Little Genie, which I think is one of Elton's best tracks. But I digress. I think Damon Albarn has really embarrassed himself with his comments recently. I mean, they're quite idiotic in my view, because to suggest that writing in a team is in some way wrong is just based on absolutely nothing. As Gary correctly pointed out, what about Lennon and McCartney? What about, John Osborne, Elton John and Gary Osborne, and of course, Elton's work with Bernie? What about so many people who write in teams? I sympathise with the view that these teams of 13 and 14 songwriters in the modern world are producing a lot of bad music. But there's always been formulaic pop. It's just that the formulaic pop used to be a bit better, the brill building stuff and Motown. So a lot of top 40 music these days, I think, is absolute rubbish. But that's just my view. All my mates like it. My brother likes it. So, at least it's their cup of tea.
Well, Tom, why,
I think Damon,
why is it rubbish?
Why is it rubbish? Well, a lot of it's quite unpleasant sounding to me. A lot of the hip hop as well. I mean, there's some brilliant hip hop out there, but a lot of the stuff that's in the top 40, stuff like Thegb, I just think is noise personally. But there are some people who enjoy it. So, God bless them.
But I think what Damon Albarn was saying, Tom, is that these enormous writing teams, when you see sort of writing credits and it's 8, 9, 10 writers, I think his argument was at that point, it's no longer a piece of art. It's just a commercial product.
I agree with that point, but I think the way he phrased it was very clumsy because, and also he used an example that was just very ill-informed. So it made his whole point collapse. Taylor Swift, even though I'm not that big a fan of her music personally. I can see that she's extremely talented, and I think she writes all of her songs at least, only with one other person, maybe. I don't think she writes in huge teams. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the songs do actually have something to do with her personally. So it was just quite a weird example, quite a strange thing when there must be so many examples he could have chosen of people who write in teams of like 12, 13, 14, you name it. I don't understand. It felt like a bit of a cheap publicity stunt, but then again, this week has been full of cheap publicity stunts in the music world, hasn't it?
Too right. Well said. Now, Gary, sorry we lost you there, but great to have the line back. Do you think that history will be kind to the likes of Ed Sheeran and Adele? I mean, can you honestly say that they're up there with Lennon, McCartney and others?
I think maybe time's going to have to tell about that. I'm not sure about that. They're great. They are proper artists, and they're doing the right thing. They're doing good music. But this thing about the big teams, the average song in America last year had 9 writers. Do you know how that can be possible? It's all about streaming. It's all about the writing for the algorithm. If you don't catch them in 5 seconds, the average click is 5 seconds before they skip to another song. The songwriter doesn't make any money until it's been playing for 30 seconds. So forget the intro, no. Forget the first verse, no. Just go straight to the chorus. And all these songs start with the chorus. Now, there's good precedent for that. Nile Rodgers always started with the chorus. Start with the chorus is one of the ways of writing. But the algorithm brings the data to the record company, and the record company goes to the publisher goes to the writer and says, you've got to do it this way, because that's the only way and that becomes a feedback loop. They write to get onto the algorithm likes it, and it makes it more of the same. So it's more and more of the same. That's the problem. How do they do it? Do you know how they do it? Do you know how they do things? Right, you got 2 guys doing the beats. That's the basic track. You got then bring in a top line writer. That's someone who's supposed to write the melody and the words. Well, you like the melody, but the words weren't great, so you bring in a lyricist. Right. Count these. Now we're up to 4. Count them. You may need your feet as well, because this goes into double digits in a minute. Now, you want a guitar solo. The budget isn't great. Make him a writer. Now we need a sample of a brass figure from a 4 Tops record. So now we've got to pay the writers of that. That's Holland, Dozier and Holland. I think we're now up to 8 writers. We haven't even paid the guy who brought the cocaine to the studio. He's often a writer. Now,
the most important person.
Not at all. The fish and chip guy, whatever it is. I think we're now at 11. But wait, there's 2 producers. They got to get a piece of the action. And there's a 4-piece girl group. And they're all promised. I'm not mentioning any names of recently parting, but they all get 5% of the song each. So we're now at 15 writers, and it wasn't difficult to get to 15. And these people often haven't met each other. So it's like a little factory. And this guy, it's like, this guy makes the doorknobs, and this guy makes the wheels, and then they all get put together by the producer. And it's a creative process, but I don't think it's a creative process that's really life-enhancing.
Tom, many people stream individual songs, and therefore, are we witnessing the death of the album? And is that a factor in relation to the quality of music we now hear?
I think it is, and I think the album will never make a comeback, sadly, which I find very sad. I remember the days of hearing the Beatles for the first time, for example, and that was when you had to save up and buy an album on CD, and you couldn't buy endless albums. And therefore, it made you listen to it again and again and appreciate all the different parts, the harmonies, and you just got the music in your soul a lot more. Nowadays, music is valued as much by consumers as a clip on TikTok or, a YouTube video of someone sitting at home going on a rant about something. The fact is, it's just a short form piece of content, a song. And beforehand, in the past, it was really valued by people a lot more than it is now. And that's why an album is going to become more and more an outdated piece of art for everybody other than big music fans like me, or for the Adele market, the people who will go out and buy records made by superstars. But in the days of the 1970s, wonderful era where the mainstream was full of incredible music, that's gone. It's more niche. It's for music nerds like me, basically.
And Tom, is there less musicianship at play as well, given the advent of technology in the studio?
No, I would say that that's a preconception I had before I started doing my podcast. And what, in fact, is the case is that the playing has got a lot better across the board. In general, I would say, among session musicians. The problem is none of them have any money and none of them play on many big records. So in the old days, you still had wonderful musicianship, but these people were perhaps a smaller group of very dedicated and excellent musicians. Now everybody can play and there's no use for them because of the technology. So it's a question of where the money is. The money in music these days is with people who are Instagram influencers, people who look good, people who know how to market themselves. They're stars, they're celebrities. They're not necessarily great players or singers, a lot of them in the top 40. And that's, of course, where all the money is. And, that's another rabbit hole. Where exactly can people make a living in music? Because Spotify certainly aren't paying very much.
Briefly, Tom, do you fear for the future of popular music?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Gary said, time is going to tell how great we look back on the likes of Adele and, for example, I thought Anderson .Paak and Mars's album Silk Sonic was excellent. I think there is great stuff out there. Only time will tell how it's going to be regarded. But I think I'm pretty worried, and I don't think that we are ever going to have those days of the 60s, 70s, even 80s, and we're going to look back on that as a cultural golden age. And I've resigned myself to the fact I'm going to be listening to, Elton John music for the rest of my life. Nothing's as good. And the Beatles and Hall and Oates and Eagles and Phil Collins and just all of that glorious pop music. It just doesn't get any better, plain and simple.
Well, yes. I tend to agree. Elton John has had quite the career, and he co-wrote the entirety of A Single Man with Gary Osborne, who's with us now. So many amazing songs, Gary. I remember last time you were with us in the studio, I quoted the stunning lyrics to Shine On Through, the opening number in that album. It's a classic. In fact, apparently you want me to send you some money for that. So I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. But Gary,
it's just, yes.
Would Elton John get a record deal in 2022? I'm not sure he would.
What a great question. I'm not sure that he would at all. I mean, I really don't know. I really don't think he would. How strange. Phil Collins wouldn't. It's if you're not, well, anyway, look. The cream hopefully will rise to the top in future. And thank God we do have people like Sharon. Although I got to tell you, the other thing is repetition. Repetition. If they get one line in the chorus, there's no development, there's no story. It's just one line over and over. There's one that Ed Sheeran wrote. I was listening to the other day. He wrote it with Bryan Adams, both good writers. The chorus goes, shine a light, 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 everywhere you go, shine a light. Shine a light, 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 shine a light. With everyone you know, shine a light, shine a light. 13 shine a lights. And the chorus is repeated 4 times. So, I mean, by the end of it, I'm bombarded with, and I don't know, I haven't learned anything, except that it's dark, and he thinks you should turn on the lights, which I suppose is good advice. Good advice. Hey, listen, you were so flattering about me. You bigged me up so much when I was on the show that you made me sound like a much bigger success than I am. People have been phoning up trying to borrow money. The tax man's on. all your fault. I'm a minor lyricist. Get it into your head. I am not Sir Elton John. And the tax people, please get it into yours as well.
It's very true. I can confirm Gary Osborne is down to his last Bentley. Of course, Gary's worked with many musicians, and he was the principal lyricist on the concept album, Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds, which is now on tour in a stunning live show. Go to Live Nation to get tickets for that one. And Tom Cridland is the presenter and creator of a fabulous, excellent podcast. It's called The Greatest Musicians of All Time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to catching up in the near future. Now, let's get to your views. Our Twitter poll has now reported its results, and 83% of you say yes, modern music is rubbish, while 17%, possibly some of my younger viewers, say no. Lots more to come. Don't forget, my Mark Meets guest at 10 o'clock is the Pizza Express and Channel 4 chairman, formerly, and now entrepreneur and lockdown critic Luke Johnson, live in the studio. Get your questions in now, mark at gbnews.uk. But after this, Neil Hamilton and Christine Hamilton will be reflecting on the runners and riders for a potential Tory party leadership contest. A busy show. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Reacting to the big stories of the day is my amazing panel tonight. Comedian Nick Dixon, broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and leader of the UK Independence Party and former Conservative MP Neil Hamilton. As the wait for Sue Gray's report into Downing Street parties goes on and on and on, intrigue remains over whether Boris Johnson will face a vote of no confidence and who could succeed him as Prime Minister. Well, longtime foe of Boris, Tom Tugendhat, has put his head above the parapet and announced that he wants the top job. Far from being a household name, Tugendhat lacks any ministerial experience, which is so often viewed as crucial in leadership contests. However, the army veteran is said to have the support of centrist Tories who admire his foreign policy expertise and tough attitude towards China and Russia. They believe that Tugendhat would represent a fresh start. So what do we think about this? Neil, you've of course elected several Tory leaders in your time, although you're out of the party now. Do you think Boris is essentially toast? Is it over for him?
Well, I've no idea, because it depends on the 54 MPs who have the capacity to trigger a leadership election. And I have no idea how many are in Graham Brady's inbox at the minute, and how many might follow those who have already put their letters in. But it's a bit like electing a pope, really, in reverse, isn't it?
Well, if you were a Tory backbencher, and you have been, of course, for many years, would you be wanting a change at the top at this point? Would you have put a letter in already?
Well, I'm not so bothered about Partygate, although, of course, it's quite wrong that the people who make the rules then cheerfully decide that they don't apply to them. Obviously, that kind of hypocrisy is very, very damaging. But I don't really know what Boris stands for, apart from everything that I've spent most of my life opposing, which I don't expect Conservative leaders to support. He's doing nothing about the migration crisis, nothing about the cost of living crisis, except plans to make it worse by putting up taxes in a few weeks' time. Done this eco-lunacy that he's been responsible for exacerbating on so many fronts. This is a very unconservative administration, as I see it, anyway, looking back over the course of my life. So I don't really know what Boris is about, except that fundamentally he's an entertainer.
Yes.
Except that, they're not laughing now, are they?
Well, they're not really, that's right. I mean, would a change at the top be the answer for this government?
Well, that depends on what the alternatives are. And I think we can say the alternatives are the 7 vertically challenged individuals who might have come into the frame if a leadership election.
Who's sleepy? Who's grumpy?
Yeah, well, plenty of dopies, I'm sure. But
yeah.
So who knows? Tom Tugendhat is a most unlikely successor, shall we say. Who knows anything about any of his
Is he
views?
just boosting his profile with this manoeuvre?
Oh, well, I should think so, yes, leaving his visiting card.
Yeah.
He may be a very worthy chap, for all I know, except that anybody who describes himself as a centrist is, I think, in the wrong party. And he's perhaps wandered into the Tory party, whereas he should have been in the Lib Dems or whatever. So who knows? That doesn't fill me with any great optimism that he's the right man for the job.
Yeah, I mean, does your gut tell you that a leadership election is in the offing? It's a dilemma for Tory backbenchers, isn't it? Because the Prime Minister is clearly a very sort of negative figure at the moment, but he is historically an election-winning machine. So underestimate this man at your peril.
Yeah, but I think that the backstory that I was talking about a minute ago is far more important than the current squall that is buffeting the Tory ship. The migration crisis is going to get worse. We've had 2,000 illegal migrants paddling across the Channel in January in the terrible weather that we've had. What's it going to be like in the summer? 30,000 of them last year, all now being put up in hotels at our expense. And they're here effectively forever, because we know that even if people's asylum claims are rejected, they're never deported. The cost of living crisis is clearly going to assume massive importance in the weeks ahead. And the green energy crisis, the extent to which we're now dependent upon Russian gas supplies in the current situation, is hardly a cause for optimism. And with people's energy bills going to go up by 50% in the next 4 months, that's really going to hurt. And particularly people at the bottom end of the scale. What about the people in the red wall seats that Boris is supposed to have won? They will feel completely betrayed by the Tory party under Boris as Prime Minister. So those are the things that I would be worried about if I were a Tory MP.
What do you think, Christine? Is anger around Partygate a sideshow, a distraction?
No, I don't think it's a distraction at all. I quite agree that, frankly, cake or no cake couldn't matter less. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing that word. I can't believe I've actually just said it. What matters has been Boris's reaction to all this, and it's the way he's handled it all. That's what is making people so furious. Once they've got over the initial anger of not being able to go to their mother's funeral or whatever, and their fury at that, it is the way he's handled it. If he'd come out straight away and said, look, I'm sorry, this has been, idiotic. Instead of which he fuddled and whatever and said, oh, there weren't any parties and I wasn't there and there weren't a party. If he had been open with the people right from the outset and said, yes, I have made a mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, a few weeks ago.
And I don't think Neil mentioned this, apologies if you did, is Brexit. Because how many...
I like the fact that you don't listen to everything he says. No wonder you're so happily married.
is Brexit. How many people voted for Boris because they thought he was the man to get us out of the EU? they have been so far, frankly, yes, he got us out, but he hasn't really got us very far out, has he? And he's done nothing about it. He hasn't picked up the baton that he was handed by the electorate and run with it.
But is there anyone in the Tory party, in your estimation, that can do that?
Well, I'm also very far removed from the Tory party now. I'm not a member, I'm not a voter, etc., etc. But never forget, talking about back to the beginning, Tom Tugendhat, I don't know much about him, seems a perfectly decent sort. He may well be the answer to the nation's prayer. Don't forget Margaret Thatcher came from the sidelines. She was a minister, of course, so she had a little bit more form than he did. Nobody would have put their money on Margaret Thatcher before she put her hat in the ring. So, honestly, who knows? And at least he's had the balls to do it.
Yes. Do you admire anyone on the Tory backbenches that could step into the fray? A dark horse candidate?
You're asking me to identify somebody?
Well, yeah, I mean, I spoke
them off,
to
wouldn't it? Once and for all.
I spoke to the Thatcherite group, the Bruges group, a couple of weeks ago, and they suggested Jacob Rees-Mogg.
No. Oh, not.
Well, that would certainly be an interesting
I guess you could call him a true Conservative compared to Boris.
Yeah, in a way. I can't think that he's likely to emerge, I must say. Entertaining that it would be for the rest of us, I've no doubt. He would certainly raise the intellectual tone, but whether he is ultimately the kind of campaigner that the Tories need, I rather doubt. But who knows? Desperate diseases require desperate remedies, and
it would be quite fun if he did put his hat in the ring. I think he would ginger
Well, it would
up.
be a top hat, wouldn't it?
It would be a top hat.
Is Liz Truss Margaret Thatcher 2.0, a woman you both knew well?
I didn't know her at all, actually, because I'm so old, you see.
Margaret Thatcher.
I knew Margaret.
Yes,
I thought
very well.
No, you knew Margaret Thatcher. Is Liz Truss Margaret Thatcher 2.0?
You certainly know Margaret Thatcher, but then nobody else could be. But
has she got battle axe potential, Liz Truss?
Well, she's obviously got balls, hasn't she?
Yes, I think
you can
she
tell
has.
that.
Yeah.
That's a story.
Well, she was a Remainer. That's something which I regard with suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking at you very intently at this point.
That's right, exactly. You've got a Remainer in your midst. Well, look, Nick, notwithstanding the soap opera that is the Tory party at the moment, does Britain need a new Prime Minister?
Well, you've asked me a tough one. I'm semi-sympathetic to Boris now because I'm worried about the alternatives, basically. And he has got us out of COVID restrictions. So I'm sort of almost, at the time when everyone hates him because of Partygate, I hate the hypocrisy, but like Christine, I think it's been overdone a little bit. I'm interested in this Tugendhat running. I agree with you that he's doing it for status, because it's a bit early to go for the leadership. Because what is interesting is, and obviously Neil knows this better than anyone, but there's always a dark horse candidate. John Major was a dark horse candidate with the Tories. David Cameron was thought too young at the time, and then that proved to be nonsense. And even Theresa May was a sort of dark horse candidate. So someone might
all
come
three
through.
of them a disaster.
Right, that turns out. But someone always seems to come through on it, because the obvious candidates are Rishi and Liz Truss. But I think someone else is going to emerge, but I don't know who it is
Well,
yet.
I wonder if it's somebody that's not tainted by this current administration.
Yeah.
Someone like Tugendhat that can say, I was not there, I was not involved.
Well, Tugendhat's issue is he's a Remainer, which is a bit of a problem for the Red Wall, but he is a military figure, which is helpful with all this Ukraine stuff. My favourite is Steve Baker, because he's a good mixture of an idealist and a pragmatist. He sort of held the line on Brexit, he held the line on COVID restrictions being abolished, but he's also a pragmatist. He talks about herding the tigers, and he knows what it takes to actually get things done. So I like him, and he's a Christian, which I like.
Well, there you go. Well, a recent poll has found that Labour is now more trusted than the Tories on several key issues, including Boris Johnson's leavening up agenda. According to the Ipsos Mori survey, Labour has also opened up a 10-point lead when it comes to setting the right level of taxation, as well as leading on improving the NHS and reducing the cost of living. However, the Conservatives are still seen as the best party to grow Britain's economy and handle the coronavirus pandemic. That said, with Keir Starmer beginning to win some important political arguments, is Labour an electoral force to be reckoned with? Christine?
Well, there's certainly a lot more to be reckoned with now than they were previously. Keir Starmer's had quite a lot of time in the spotlight. They've always been more trusted with the NHS. The Tories have never been trusted with the NHS, so there's no change there. But on the key issue, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. When the bottom line comes, people vote with their wallets and their personal interests. So if they think they're going to be better off under the Tories, then they'll vote for the Tories. We are miles from an election. I mean, unless there's some catastrophe around the corner, we are many months, several years from, what is it, 3 years? More
Yes,
than 3 years
potentially
now.
2024.
So I think, an awful lot of water can go under the bridge. Well, yes, certainly Labour are now looking much more electable than they were under Jeremy Corbyn. Remember
Wouldn't be
him?
difficult, would it?
What do you think, Neil? You'll be fielding candidates whenever the election comes. Smart money, I think, is on 2023 because governments don't like to go right to the wire. But do you think Labour are a growing threat to the Tories?
No, I think the Tories are a growing threat to the Tories.
Yes.
I think that's the key point here. When people, if the polls are correct, that people are more likely to think that Labour is the low-tax party. Clearly, there's something wrong in the system, isn't there? But of course, what we're going to see this year is that the tax burden in Britain will rise to the highest level since the Attlee government, which was the Labour government after the war. Highest tax burden since 1950. Under a Conservative government. So if the Tories throw away what should be their magic golden card, which they clearly intend on doing, double the national debt in a year, so inevitably their reputation for financial prudence and knowing what they're doing with the economy has been very gravely damaged by the experience of the last couple of years.
Very briefly, Neil, you will hope to influence several constituencies at the next election. Every vote counts. Do you think that Keir Starmer has the chops to actually win an election? Can Labour achieve a majority under any circumstances?
I mean, I don't think that the Labour Party is fundamentally electable at all. They're more and more reduced to the identity politics seats where people vote because they're members of a particular race or from a different religion or whatever. And they've lost the traditional white working class voter base which they had.
Well, which of
huge
course,
swathes
which
of the
we
country.
saw in December 2019. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. More from Neil, Nick and Christine after this.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
You're watching and listening to Mark Dolan tonight. So much more to get through in the next 2 hours. My Mark Meets guest is one of the country's most successful and high-profile entrepreneurs. Luke Johnson taking your questions, mark at gbnews.uk. And later in the hour, in our news agenda with Neil and Christine Hamilton and Nick Dixon, when is the right time to pop the question? Plus, another great British game show. So lots to get through. But first, the headlines with Miranda Shunker.
Thank you, Mark. The top stories this hour from the GB newsroom. A 9-year-old boy and a 60-year-old woman have been killed by falling trees as Storm Malik continues to batter parts of the UK. Winds of more than 100 miles per hour have been reported in parts of Scotland, with widespread disruption to travel and power supplies. More than 36,000 homes are affected by the storm, mainly in Northumberland and County Durham. And it doesn't end there. The Met Office says another blast of severe strong winds, officially named Storm Tory, is set to affect Scotland tomorrow. The Prime Minister is planning to travel to Eastern Europe next week in a bid to prevent a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. Downing Street say Boris Johnson will speak to President Putin on the phone and is determined to ramp up diplomatic efforts. He'll also consider options, including extra military deployments and bolstering NATO defences. Speaking to GB News earlier, former Defence Secretary Ian Duncan-Smith urged the European Union to stand up to Russia.
If they invade Ukraine, I think it is a threat to the way we live our lives. It is a threat to NATO. This is a democracy. It's a country that has the right to free choice. We've been giving them arms. I wish the rest of the European Union now would actually back up what the UK and America are doing.
The Met Police have been criticised by a former Attorney General over its handling of the Downing Street party allegations. Lord Morris says he's dismayed with Scotland Yard after Sue Gray was asked by the force to ensure her report made minimal reference to number 10 events they're looking into. It's led to claims that police were delaying its publication, which they deny. Former advisor to Theresa May, Joey Jones, thinks the police should now reflect on their own conduct.
Probably the Met that have more questions to ask themselves at the moment as to how they've allowed themselves to get into a situation where there's so much cynicism, so much anger, that could have been avoided quite easily just by being a bit more transparent and a bit more upfront about the reasons behind their decision-making.
Now, did you know that a major overhaul of the highway code has come into force today? Because there are concerns millions of drivers are simply not aware of the changes. New guidance means traffic must give way when pedestrians cross a junction. Cyclists should also ride in the centre of lanes on quieter roads to make themselves more visible. And the Canadian singer Joni Mitchell has asked streaming site Spotify to remove her catalogue of music over concerns about COVID misinformation. The Grammy Award winner says the site allows irresponsible people to spread lies that were costing people their lives. It follows a similar move earlier this week by Neil Young. Spotify says it aims to balance both safety for listeners and freedom for creators, adding it had removed over 20,000 podcast episodes related to COVID since the start of the pandemic. Well, you're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Big reactions coming in on email to my big opinion monologue, which you can now find at GB News on Twitter, and also our conversation in the news agenda about the Conservatives, about the leadership, and whether Britain needs a new Prime Minister. An interesting email from Phil, who says, "Hi Mark, Labour can never get a majority without Scottish seats. Unfortunately, they've given up on Scotland." Elizabeth says, Tugendhat, a hero. This is Tom Tugendhat, who has thrown his hat into the ring in the light or in the event of any Tory leadership contest. Where did you get that from, that he's a hero? He's an odious little self-promoter who touted himself as Foreign Secretary when Boris was Foreign Secretary. He's now touting himself as PM now that Boris has the top job. Evan says, Tugendhat is a Remainer. Partygate looks more like a Ramona plot every day. Similar thoughts coming in from Tony, who is not a fan of Tom Tugendhat. And it's interesting because we're getting a big response to GB News. We've heard from the TV presenter and radio host Jay Rayner, who said he would rather put needles in his eyes than appear on GB News. Pretty harsh words. It's the topic of my big opinion. And here's an email. Hi, Mark. Thank you for you and everyone at GB News, because you all have given the British people a voice and the freedom to exercise our voices with good, honest debate, where the establishment would love to silence all of us. And thank the Lord for GB News, because this is the news channel I've been waiting for, and I've been watching BBC News and Sky News. It's like watching paint dry. Well, thanks very much for your kind words on that one. Margaret says, "Dear Mark, I watch GB News every day. It's so refreshing to have a channel that speaks for the silent majority, and long may it continue." Well, Margaret, thanks very much. Thanks for your many positive emails, but do keep the lines of communication going. Let us know what we're getting right and what we're not getting right. mark@gbnews.uk. Well, a busy hour to come. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the good and the great in the world of showbiz, politics, business, academia and beyond. And I speak to those who simply have a big story to tell. Luke Johnson is the former chairman of Pizza Express, the Royal Society of Arts and Channel 4. He's part owner of Gale's Artisan Bakery and Feng Sushi, among other businesses, as well as being a former owner of the Ivy in London and the Giraffe restaurant chain. Let me tell you, they do a great all-day breakfast. A critic of many of the government's COVID measures, Luke Johnson has spent the last 2 years drawing attention to the huge impact of on the hospitality industry of lockdowns and other COVID restrictions. It's safe to say he's not a fan. Luke Johnson has transformed the fortunes of companies like Pizza Express. When he took control of the chain in 1993, he expanded the business from 12 owned restaurants to over 250, and the share price went from 40p to over 900 pence. For this man, turning a profit is in his DNA. That's right, the drinks are on him. Luke Johnson, welcome to GB News.
Good evening.
Great to have you on the show. Were you an entrepreneurial child?
No, I think I only became an entrepreneur while I was at university, and it was by accident. I was having parties with a friend, and the college said to us, we'll kick you out if you carry on. So we went to a local nightclub and did a deal with them whereby they took the bar money and we took the door money, and we held our parties at the nightclub, and it worked a storm, and I've sort of not looked back, really.
So you got the bug. You had, a bit like a gambler, you got an early win.
Exactly. My friend and I were both due to become doctors. We were studying medicine, and we graduated, but we never continued as medics, and we both went into business, and that's what I've been doing for the last 40 years.
Do you regret all of that medical training?
No, not at all. Funnily enough, it's come in vaguely useful over the last 2 years, because I reckon bluntly, I've got rather more medical training than the vast majority of the cabinet, which is a bit unfortunate. I mean, admittedly, mine's decades old, but nevertheless, I think that, you know, we tend to have politicians, ministers in this country, even health ministers, who know nothing, have no domain knowledge. And so they have been quite unable to interrogate Sage and the other public health scientists and epidemiologists properly, and are, I think, intimidated by the science. And this is one of the reasons why they've rolled over when it's come to all the restrictions and so forth.
I think it's very understandable, as you said, given that politicians don't have medical training, that they would struggle to probe the advice given by Sage. Although I would argue that there have been some top medics who also haven't asked questions. GPs and consultants in the NHS who, in my view, have gone along with the cosy COVID consensus.
I agree. I'm afraid to say I think there's been a great deal of groupthink and consensus thinking, and anyone who's been a contrarian, you know, they've been demonised. And even if you, for example, like me, are essentially doubtful about the harms of lockdowns, you're branded an anti-vaxxer. I'm actually vaccinated and I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Yeah. But I do think that things like closing schools and neurotic fear, all the propaganda that's been pumped out has led to a great deal of harm. And the collateral damage with things like other medical treatments not seen to cancer and heart disease and so forth, because the NHS has become obsessed in a monomaniac fashion with one disease, is not been the right policy.
When did you first identify in the course of the pandemic that there was a problem? Because I think at the start, You know, this was an unknown quantity, wasn't it? And we were told 3 weeks to flatten the curve. I don't know too many people that didn't accept the principle of 3 weeks just to sort of see how the virus was going to play out. So what was the moment where you said no?
Well, bluntly, it was April, May in 2020, because I think the government and the scientific advisors have never focused on the fact that there is this extraordinary differentiation. So if you are 20 and healthy, compared to someone who is in their 60s, someone in their 60s is 10,000 more times at risk than a young, healthy person. And there should have been focused protection of the vulnerable, the elderly and the ill. Instead of which, we've had universal lockdowns and restrictions affecting everyone. And as I say, this has caused untold harms to mental health, to education, to the economy as a whole. And of course, poorer nations have poorer health. And, you know, we have to ask the question, if we keep impoverishing ourselves by shutting things, how are we to pay for the NHS?
You've been an outspoken critic of the COVID measures. Have you paid a personal price for that view?
Not really, to be honest, because I work for myself, so I can't be fired. And although, you know, some of my businesses have suffered because they're in areas like hospitality, they've all survived, so I'm lucky in that sense. And, you know, I feel fortunate I haven't been very ill myself. Obviously, some people have. It's a serious disease. I don't doubt that. But nevertheless, I think for the country to go into this unbelievably disproportionate set of reactions, you know, we have to get a sense of, you know, there are other illnesses and other factors in life. And I'm glad to see going around London today on a Saturday, it's getting back to where it should be. We're remembering what life's about.
Do you think the fundamentals of the British economy are such that we can bounce back?
I do. I think we need to recover our confidence. We need to look forward with optimism. We need to shrug off the fear.
We need to know that there won't be any future restrictions, don't we? Because I would argue, but you're the expert, that it's the threat of restrictions which are almost as bad as the restrictions themselves.
I think that's true. I think most people now believe that the government will not impose lockdowns again, because I think after 2 years, essentially people have had enough. And therefore, you know, the risk of that is, I hope, slight. Because I think they've never been proved to be effective, and they do cause enormous other harms, which, you know, we've never had a proper analysis of all the cost benefits of lockdowns and so forth. And I think that's another area where the government's failed us.
A professor of statistics at the University of Bristol told me on this programme that creating the biggest recession in 300 years, which is what happened, it wasn't an accident, it was as a result of an attempt to control this virus, that we may see the loss of 500,000 lives in the long run. And you mentioned that poorer countries are unable to look after public health in the way that richer countries can. So that's obviously a concern, and that's a big price potentially that we've paid. Do you think that there should have been more economists on stage advising in relation to the pandemic?
Absolutely. And I think there should have been more people who had something to lose from all the restrictions. One of the problems has been that everyone making the decisions has been in a safe public sector job with a nice pension and all the rest of it. So none of them were going to lose their jobs, and in a way they were enjoying the power and enjoying the fame.
I don't know too many self-employed taxi drivers or security guards that backed lockdowns.
Quite. And maybe it's because I'm an entrepreneur and a lot of people I know are entrepreneurs, but they have been, almost to a woman and a man, opposed to this sort of totalitarian, you know, locking us in our homes and so forth. It's just unprecedented and disproportionate.
Clearly, the government will argue that they've attempted to save lives by getting people to stay home. The NHS, it's argued before each of the 3 national lockdowns was perilously close to being overwhelmed. So they'll argue that, you know, that's a set of policies that they've outlined, and they will defend their record on that. Although it's hard not to look at the examples of other countries that had a very light touch set of measures when it came to the pandemic with seemingly similar outcomes.
Yeah, and, one can point to Sweden, which generally speaking have very few lockdowns.
And the problem is, you mentioned Sweden, it feels like it's such a shorthand now for, not having lockdowns.
Yeah.
You feel like a stuck record mentioning Sweden, don't you?
I know, and those who are in favour of lockdowns don't want to hear about it, and they find any excuse to criticise it and somehow portray it as unsuccessful. But I would argue that the overall outcomes, socially, medically and economically, were far better than ours. And I will give Boris and the government credit that since July of last year, they have pursued a somewhat different path to many other countries in Europe. And actually, we now currently have far fewer restrictions than places like, France and Holland and Germany and Italy and so forth. So in that sense, we're better off than some, at least.
Notwithstanding a healthy bottom line, what does a successful business look like? A business which is fit for purpose? What are the key elements?
Well, clearly, you've got to have a product that people want to buy. You've got to have a sufficient margin.
Does it have to be any good, the product?
I think so. I think that virtually everything is a repeat purchase. So if it's poor quality, people won't buy it again, and you will have no customer loyalty. You've got to have something distinctive about your business, a unique selling proposition so that you stand out. You've got to have proper levels of service. You've got to have the right competitive instinct in there, and some model that is sustainable, because you don't want to be a flash in the pan. You want your business to endure and continue to grow. And I think all the best businesses are those that are dynamic and can innovate and evolve as markets and habits change.
And what has being in business for several decades taught you?
Well, that you can never give up. I've had my fair share of setbacks and made mistakes, but you have to be resilient. You have to get up and press on. And I think, in a way, that's what the last 2 years has taught the whole country. And we now need to recover our enthusiasm and get back to work, start being productive again, and live our lives rather than hiding.
Speculate to accumulate.
There's some of that too, yes.
And what about people within businesses? I mean, you've been the chairman of several major companies, and of course you've got multiple investments right now, including the Gales artisan bakery chain, of which I'm a huge fan. It's been very hard to be low carb since you guys hit the high street, I must say. But what sort of skills need to be deployed by a great leader, a great business leader? What do you think that you bring to the party that's made you so successful?
I think a great business leader needs to be a talent spotter. Mm-hmm. So they have to be able to recruit great people alongside them, and they have to be able to motivate those people. They have to be able to enthuse them.
With more than just money?
Yeah, excite them. And I think culture matters enormously. And one of the reasons, actually, why I'm in favour of people getting back to the workplace is because I think a virtual, Zoom organisation where no one is in the offices, etc., corporate culture disappears. Where's loyalty? Where's the engagement? So you need to be able to find the right people to work alongside who have the right skill sets, and you need to be able to make them feel that they are part of a mission and that they're going to put in the sufficient commitment to achieve success.
And Pizza Express, one of your great success stories, how did you transform that business?
We merged it together with all its franchisees, so they all became company-owned restaurants. We opened a hell of a lot of new restaurants all over the country. We made it a lot more efficient in terms of its administration. But in terms of the actual menu and the key model, we kept it the same. Actually.
You had a winning formula.
Absolutely.
And a strong product.
Yeah. It was always a great brand that was underexploited.
Have the pizzas at Pizza Express shrunk?
Never, to my knowledge. Admittedly, I haven't been involved with the business for 20 years, but as far as I know, they're the same size they've ever been.
It's apocryphal. Have you heard those tales?
It's one of those urban myths that's not true.
They might have got bigger on your watch, who knows?
Well, they didn't while I was there.
12-inch. No. It's obviously a remarkable business. Is there a danger that sometimes when companies like Pizza Express get taken over, that they lose their personality and also possibly the quality goes down? Is that a risk?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the dangers generally is that if giant international groups buy something, they can sometimes spoil it. And
what do they do?
Well, I think they lose the great people who get demoralised. I think they make it bland. They try and cut costs too much, cheaper suppliers, etc. And they don't invest.
I think, did that happen to Café Rouge?
I fear it did, yes. RIP.
I know they've got a few outlets, but not on the scale that they once
had. It's more
had.
or less disappeared as a brand. It's a tough game, the restaurant business. You know, an awful lot of them never survived the departure of the founder.
Well, I think that's obviously an important thing, that the country, the company's spiritual leader, as it were. How about hospitality post-pandemic? I mean, will people start going back to restaurants en masse, or do you think that that setting will be sort of changed forever?
No, it's already happening. As I said earlier, I've been out and about in a few places in
So
London
people aren't
today.
insisting on socially distancing or...
Well, they might be in small doses, but I would say that places, considering it's January, we're looking very full today.
Good.
And I actually think there's a boom coming, potentially. People have got a lot of savings. There's a lot of pent-up demand to socialise. At the end of the day, we are social animals. We want to be with other people and celebrate. Just outside your studios here, I saw a wedding celebration going on.
Wonderful.
You know, there's a lot of all that to come this year. So I think actually it may end up being a good year.
And I think the same could be the case for the event industry as well, because lots of companies who do these annual events, it's going to be even more important now with people having been stuck on Zoom for 2 years. Getting people together is going to be a premium.
It is. And I have businesses in that sort of sector, bowling alleys and things, and the phone is ringing off the hook with people wanting to make bookings. So we're looking forward to a bumper period, I think.
You were the chairman of Channel 4 when it was performing very well in the ratings. I remember shows like Balls of Steel, for example.
Yes, I recall that. You might have been on that one, I think.
It clocked a few viewers, and look, there was great drama on there, great documentaries, and Channel 4 has a very special place on the TV schedule. But do you think it's time to sell Channel 4?
I do, because I think that its current model as the second public service broadcaster owned by the government is unnecessary. I think it could be, for example, taken public, sold off to ordinary people who would become shareholders. I'm sure it could succeed as a for-profit business. It's always funded its own way. It's never taken part of the licence fee or anything. And I think it would need to keep its special flavour and branding if it's to be successful. So I don't think the DNA would be damaged by, a sell-off. But I think it would enable it to, for example, expand by way of acquisition and merger, which it's never really been able to do. And I think, for example, it could buy production companies, which it's limited in its abilities to do that. So I think its time has come.
Do you have a view on its current output?
Well, it has some decent shows, but clearly the competition from Sky and Netflix and Amazon and all the other streaming services and so forth is immense, greater than ever before. So clearly it's a struggle for a smaller broadcaster like Channel 4. And I think that's another reason why it needs to have its freedom.
What's next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue to invest in new businesses, and I bought several in the last 18 months, including a brewery and a couple of e-commerce businesses. So I intend to carry on doing what I've been doing for the last few decades.
What kind of businesses catch your eye when you're seeking to invest?
Ones that have good people running them, that have potential to grow, that
is it good if they're struggling?
Value. Yes, I bought some struggling businesses over the years, and of course they're high risk, high reward, and sometimes it doesn't work and they fail. But you try and turn them around, obviously, and if you buy a distressed business and it works, then the returns can be pretty attractive. And it's very satisfying saving a business and making it succeed.
You're clearly a great media operator. Would you appear on Dragon's Den as a dragon?
Well, funnily enough, I was asked to appear in the first series, but it was just as I was starting the Channel 4 job, so I felt I couldn't do it because it was a BBC show. The answer is I think not now. No, they want younger people.
Well, look, it's been a privilege to have you on the show, and I wish you and your many employees a very successful 2022. Luke Johnson, brilliant stuff. I think you'll agree, a very inspiring conversation. tinged with a note of optimism, which is very welcome. Lots more to come after this. US news from the other side of the pond with the queen of American showbiz and royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. More from the Hamiltons and Nick Dixon in our news agenda, and another great British game show. I'll see you shortly.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking cold and bright to start, before rain and strong winds spread southeastwards later. Let's take a look at the details. A chilly morning across southwest England with frost to start for some, though it will be dry, and with those clear skies there will be plenty of sunshine around tomorrow. A bright and fine morning for London and the southeast, although it will be rather chilly to start the day with some frost around. Across Wales, it will be a dry start to Sunday with plenty of sunshine around, albeit a little chilly with a frost in places. Zooming into northwest England now, and it will be a dry, bright, but generally a rather chilly morning on Sunday, with plenty of sunshine around and a patchy frost where skies cleared overnight. Moving across the Pennines now into northeast England, and a calmer and drier start to the day tomorrow with light winds and sunny spells, though a cold morning with a frost in places. A generally bright start to Sunday for southern Scotland, though a bit more in the way of cloud in the west. Cold in the east with a patchy local frost. Dry with bright spells for Northern Ireland tomorrow morning. A cold start though, particularly in the east where clear skies remained all night and a frost formed in places. Storm Corrie will move into western Scotland tomorrow morning, bringing strong winds and outbreaks of rain, which will spread southeastwards later.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Many positive emails coming in regard to my interview with the former chairman of Pizza Express, Luke Johnson. Karen says, Mark, if it's at all possible, could you get Luke Johnson as a panellist on a regular basis? What an impressive man. He answered every question put to him immediately in a direct and interesting manner. In response to our big opinion monologue, which is now on Twitter, in relation to those who I believe want to see GB News fail, Jane says, Dear Mark, I was introduced to your fabulous channel by my lovely neighbours Mo and Murray. They are currently on holiday in the Canary Islands, but they're still managing to watch your show, even whilst they're on holiday. It seems that so many of us now are tuning in to the best show in Britain. May your success continue. Well, Jane, thank you so much. And may I raise a glass to Mo and Murray I hope you're having a great time in the Canaries. Lovely to have your company. Also, on this issue of GB News, Dear Mark, says Brian, I only started watching last night, but I'm back again tonight. I love it. I find it difficult sometimes to express the views that I feel because I'm worried about getting into trouble. You're amazing the way you express your opinions. I only wish I had your ability and confidence. Well, Brian, thanks very much for that. I'm only confident because I know that I've got so many brilliant people watching and listening to this show. This show is nothing, this channel is nothing without you. So tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. It's time now to catch up on everything that's happening across the pond in US news with the Queen of American showbiz, political and royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hi, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. I think you found your new prime minister. Luke Johnson's pretty impressive. That was a great interview.
What an articulate guy. And I guess what he has said speaks volumes, not just in the UK, but in America as well, where there's still a great debate raging about the wisdom or otherwise of lockdowns.
You're absolutely right. There's no question that people feel like they've lost 2 years of their lives and their children have lost 2 years of education. And I just can't stress enough the mental health issues that we have happening in America over the lockdowns and over, the mass hysteria. We fear each other. We're afraid to say hi to neighbors. We can't even smile at our neighbors because in a lot of places we're still required to wear masks. So I completely agreed with you, of course, and your guest.
Well, somebody that's sparked a lively debate about COVID measures, about the pandemic, and also much besides, is the podcaster Joe Rogan. We've talked about him on this program before. He's got a show which is carried by Spotify, the streaming platform. 11 million people a week listen to and watch his program. He's very influential. And the rock star, Neil Young, has made an ultimatum. He said to Spotify that you either take Joe Rogan and his vaccine misinformation off the platform or I go. And Spotify chose Rogan over Young.
Well, and, as you guys have been reporting throughout the day, Joni Mitchell as well, I think that this is statistically speaking, I'm not being ugly at all. In no ageism here. But Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, these are people that are no longer producing new content. And Joe Rogan is producing new content on a regular basis. He is incredibly successful for Spotify. I think he actually has the number one, if not the number one podcast in the world. So obviously Spotify is going to side with a newer artist, a newer creator that is creating new content on a regular basis. They can look at the numbers of how many streams Neil Young brings in monthly, yearly. Joni Mitchell, the same game. And they just do not compete. They do not compare with Joe Rogan. Now, if Justin Bieber came out and said, I'm removing my content from Spotify, or The Weeknd, two artists that are very relevant right now and continue to produce new content, that might be of concern for Spotify. They might have to sit back and address it in a different way. But I'd also like to stress that Joe Rogan, these artists that literally have never sat down and listened to a Joe Rogan podcast. There's no way Joni Mitchell has kicked back and listened to a Joe Rogan podcast. He does not sit and talk about the coronavirus, and he doesn't sit and talk about vaccines every day 24/7. That is not the regular content. And I'd also stress that a new poll came out. Americans, only 20% or a little bit more of Americans trust the government and trust the information that they're receiving from the government about.
Now, we're having a bit of trouble getting our line to Kinsey stopped in her tracks, but I'm delighted to say that my panel of Nick Dixon, Christine and Neil Hamilton are at the ready. We're just going to reconnect that line. It's very interesting. I consider the fact that these rock stars are picking a fight with Joe Rogan has parallels with what I was saying earlier about GB News. It's powerful figures in the media who are trying to crush free speech. They just don't want a diversity of opinions. If you are Neil Young or Joni Mitchell, both great artists, it's important that they're willing to hear the views of others. Well, let's bring my panel in on this one, Nick Dixon and Christina Neil Hamilton. Nick, what do you think about these music stars stepping into this debate?
Well, it's really disappointing because I love Neil Young, I love Joni Mitchell. I checked, I've got 14 Neil Young albums. That's a lot, Mark. I've had to burn them all. It's tragic. A lot of smell of plastic from the CDs. So, yeah, it's sad because Neil Young is associated with the 60s and freedom and hippies and so on, to some degree, folk rock. And now it turns out that he's a sort of pro-censorship authoritarian who's worried about what we say about Big Pharma. So it's kind of bizarre and disappointing. And, of course, he overplayed his hand because, as was said, Rogan is much bigger than him now.
Well, as we turn our attention to our next story, let's talk about that. And it's Canada. And I've wanted to talk about this for the last 24 hours. I've had lots of emails from your good selves saying, please talk about the truckers in Canada. So here we go. The truckers in Canada have been taking part in a staggering protest against vaccine mandates for drivers. Called the Freedom Convoy, the truckers are protesting the requirement for them to provide proof of vaccination before entering Canada, with as many as 32,000, which is roughly 20% of the trucker community, remaining unjabbed. Up to 50,000 truckers entered the capital city of Ottawa today. And apparently, some Americans are also taking part. Now, Kinsey, I'm delighted to say we've re-established a line to you. First of all, how is this Canada story and the truckers going down in America?
I mean, unsurprisingly, they have a lot of support. They are. I don't really understand how anybody can argue that these individuals just want a choice. They just want to have options, and they feel like they're being cornered. So, Tucker Carlson last night really rallied for them. We are seeing a lot of support from Greg Gutfeld, who is very outspoken conservative here. So, I would say that Americans see the value of what they're doing.
Yes, Neil Hamilton, what do you think about the Canadian truckers?
Well, I think that they're striking a blow for freedom. When authoritarian governments pass irrational legislation that has no practical advantage to anybody and their lives and livelihoods are put at risk, what do you expect them to do? Of course they're going to go out and protest. And, I have the greatest possible difficulty in taking somebody like Justin Trudeau seriously. I think he's really a creation of some digital animation. He's never seems to me like a real human being at all. He's the very caricature of himself. What is the purpose of these requirements for vaccination? Everybody knows that vaccination isn't a silver bullet because it doesn't actually do much to inhibit transmission of the disease. And we know that vaccinations wear off in effectiveness in a matter of weeks. So unless people are going to continue being vaccinated every 4 or 5 weeks, then you're going to have minimal protection against transmission. And that isn't simply not going to happen. So this is just waving a flag. It's kind of virtue signalling for no purpose at all. So yes, I back the truckers and their message to him, as the byline says on the screen, truck off Trudeau.
I mean, Christine, do you think that these demonstrations will eventually feed through to policy? Will they have the desired effect?
Well, who knows? But I mean, full marks to the truckers. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Don't forget, most of them are giving up pay, they're giving up work because they believe in what they're doing. It's one of the most heartwarming things that I've seen, and it's pretty cold out there, by the way, so it's not easy for them to do this. It's one of the most heartwarming things that I've known since the Countryside March in, I think it was 2001 or 2002, when thousands, tens of thousands of people marched on Parliament, hundreds of thousands of people marched on Parliament Square to protect the livelihood and liberty in the countryside. So I think it's absolutely wonderful. And what I think is fabulous is that Justin Trudeau and his family have been moved to a safe location. Well, good, probably. But no, good for them. Keep going. Keep trucking.
Keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking.
Briefly, Kinsey, let me just ask you also what Americans think of Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who announced on Twitter this week very conveniently that he'd tested negative for COVID but was in close contact with someone that had COVID and therefore he's gone into isolation. Or is it hiding?
First of all, I realized recently that he's my LinkedIn friend, and I don't know how that happened, and I'm thrilled by the idea. He's very handsome, but we don't really take him seriously. He is very much like a Disney prince. He's very handsome. We like to watch him talk, but it's just like Charlie Brown. Womp, 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 womp. I think that I don't think anybody listens to him and looks to him for guidance in the States.
Kinsey, another vintage offering. We'll see you in a week's time for more US news. Kinsey Schofield is the queen of US royal, political and showbiz reporting. Check out her fantastic royal website, To Die For Daily. Well, lots more to come from my amazing panel. Another great British game show, this based around the rules of the Highway Code. Yes, we're going to play a game of Highway to Hell. And when is the right time to pop the question I'll have to ask Neil when he asked Christine? Or was it the other way round? See you shortly.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Lots more to come from my panel, just picking up on our conversation about the Canadian truckers. I've had an email in from Alan who says each and every one of those truckers is a hero to the man and to the woman. Well said, Alan. Nick Dixon, a quick word on the truckers. I mean, they're definitely fighting for freedom, aren't they?
Yes, well, it's not great for broadcast balance, but I agree with everyone. It's a great strike for freedom, and the COVID narrative is sort of turning. But did you see that terrible cartoon in the Toronto Star? It was all the trucks going by, and they had fascism written on the side.
That's right.
Which just completely broke the irony scale, given that it's a government mandate.
Well, I'm all for freedom of speech, including for comedians and cartoonists. But it struck me that calling these truckers fascists was a bit harsh.
Yeah, OK. Yeah, of course you should be allowed the cartoon. It's just an absurd, disgusting cartoon.
Wrong. There is a wider point, though, isn't there, about the pandemic and the fact that whether it's comedians, artists, musicians, there haven't been many voices critical of the measures we've seen. And I've been surprised, particularly perhaps among comedians who are supposed to be the great rebels of society, Neil.
Well, this is, of course, the opposite of the truth, because these people are actually conformists to the new woke mentality. Yeah. And nobody's allowed to disagree with that. And you get cancelled by the broadcasting networks or newspapers. You know, so that's the irony of all this. back in the 60s we were talking about earlier on, as an era of liberation and, let 1,000 flowers bloom or whatever it was. In those days, radical people were prepared to break the consensus. But there's a new consensus now, which is far more suffocating than any that I grew up under, back in the 1950s. And that's why channels like GBNews are here to enable people to rediscover their freedoms, which are in danger of being snuffed out.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. Well, let's crack on with some more big stories of the day with my brilliant panel. Dame Joanna Lumley has sparked debate this weekend after speaking about mental health on the podcast of GB presenter Isabel Oakeshott. Have a listen to what she had to say.
I have to say, this is a horrible thing to say, but I think that the mental health thing is being overplayed at the moment. Because anybody who's even remotely sad says they've got mental problems. You go, no, this is what's called being human. And I think it also is awful to people who really are mentally ill or are properly clinically depressed for everybody to say that they've got to have some sort of special treatment because they're... And everybody's claiming the mental illness bandwagon. I think that's wrong.
After suffering a 6-month breakdown in her 20s, Lumley speaks from experience about the difference between being sad and mentally ill. But what do we think about this? You, of course, wrote that amazing book, The Great British Book of Battle Axes. Do we need a bit more stiff upper lip?
Well, yes, we do. Of course we do. Joanna is, first of all, I think she's very brave to speak out in the way that she has, but also I think she's very entitled to speak out in the way that she has. She's connected with Mind. I'm not sure if she's a patron or a president or a friend, but anyway, she knows what she's talking about. And as you said, she has had her own problems with serious mental illness. And I think too many people now, yes, they're far too quick to say that, oh, I've got a mental illness or I've got this, that and the other, when all they've got is they've got out of bed the wrong way or their life hasn't gone right. Everybody has problems in their life. Sometimes you know about them, sometimes you don't. But I think people are far too easy to try and say they've got a mental illness when they haven't. They just do, in Joanna's words, need to get a grip.
Do some wear it like a badge of honour?
Of course they do, yes. I mean, it is not to underplay serious mental illness that many people do have. Of course it isn't. And Joanna wasn't, and I'm not, and none of us are going to do that. But I think she is absolutely right to pinpoint that too many people are too ready to jump on that bandwagon.
You've had, so far, an amazing life, a great marriage.
Yes, but it's not over yet.
It's definitely not. Many more years of glory to come. But it's been turbulent, Christine, hasn't it? For both individually and for both of you as husband and wife. Politically, financial stuff, a touch of scandal here and there. What helped you to preserve your mental health at those dark times?
Well, I know what it's like to be right down there. But I would never in a million years have said that I was mentally ill. But I do know what it's like to be incredibly depressed. Not suicidal, but, what is the point of carrying on? What are we going to do now? Why? What's the point of anything? I mean, I have been right there. Nobody believes it if they either don't know because they're too young or they forget. And I always appear sort of bubbly, but I've had...
Well, because you feared for your livelihood, the roof over your head, your careers, your reputation...
Yes,
it was all up for grabs at one point, wasn't it?
Yes, we've been bankrupt. We lost our house. Neil owed. We never really knew whether it was 2 million, 3 million, or 4. But if you can't pay the first pound, doesn't matter how many noughts there are.
Doesn't really matter how many noughts on there.
No, but I credit both of you for your fortitude of spirit getting through that, and you came out the other side.
Well, the bottom line is only you can do it. The bottom line is if you're right down there, your friends can help. If you need medical help, you can get etc., etc. But only you can actually pull yourself up.
And did you have any techniques at the time that helped get you through? Are there any tricks of the trade? A couple of glasses of wine in the evening?
Yes, exactly. We were drinking French wine.
Did wine o'clock get earlier and earlier every evening?
Well, it never finished.
That's one trick. I mean, Neil, what about you? Here you are now, the leader of a national political party. And I know that you're chomping at the bit for local elections and the next general election. So, the story continues. But what got you through those dark times?
Well, life is a test of character, fundamentally, in my view, and everybody has challenges thrown at them in life, and it's how you surmount them is really what makes life worth living. And I've spent my entire life crashing into fences and clambering over the wreckage, I suppose. And somehow or other, we've always managed to come up smiling at the end of the day, which infuriates people who don't like us even more, which is another incentive, of course. But I think it's a case of just disciplining your mind. I know that it's easy for me to say.
And does that involve staying positive, being constructive?
Yeah,
is that what it is?
I think I'm always very positive about things, because even the darkest cloud does have a silver lining, and we were able, through force of circumstances, opportunities that arrived unexpectedly, which we were able to take advantage to recreate a life for ourselves, so that when I was liberated by the electorate in 1997, we then embarked upon perhaps what many people would have regarded a rather improbable career in show business and entertainment, and where we first met at the Edinburgh Festival.
Absolutely.
When we had our own show up there for 4 seasons. Who would have ever thought that Neil and Christine Hamilton would be doing something like that when she was boring Mrs. MP and I was having to be respectable and responsible, in public at any rate, in those days. So I think life is a series of opportunities to be enjoyed and to make as much of them as you possibly can. I haven't gone through things that, say, a lot of our veterans have gone through, doing tours of Afghanistan and watching people blown to bits in front of your face. Yeah. Those things can produce serious mental repercussions. The kind of challenges we've had they weren't easy at the time, but we managed to cope with them, and if we'd not had a positive attitude, then we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Well, it's a great story of survival, and it's a great love story as well. Nick,
yes.
Do you think that we overstate mental health issues in this country?
Well, I've had some mental health issues myself. My family, we've had a suicide in my family, which is devastating, obviously. So I take it very seriously. At the same time, I agree somewhat with Joanna Lumley and with Christine that sometimes it's just you're sad and that there's a problem in your life that needs to be fixed, which is very different from clinical depression. And I would also say we tend to pathologize everything now. Because if you look throughout history, we've always had these things, used to be called melancholia. Even on the first page of Moby Dick, Ishmael talks about his hypos getting the better of him, and he has to go off to sea as the cure. So if you look through literature, we've always had...
Churchill's Black Dog.
The Black Dog, exactly. So we've always had depression under different names, and there's a tendency to over-pathologize. But of course, there are serious cases, but sometimes we're just talking about the existential challenges of life.
Yes, and you've come under attack, haven't you, in the comedy community at times for some of your views, entirely reasonable views, but which don't fit with the very woke agenda of many in comedy circles.
Right.
So at your lowest point, what were you going through?
Well, I had a horrible week where I was attacked by half the internet. It felt like half the comedy industry. You do have dark thoughts. I had some briefly some suicidal thoughts. Wasn't actually going to do it. But when you get piled on like that by the whole internet and the whole comedy world in that example, there is no real way to cope with that. You enter a sort of fight or flight mentality and you don't know how to cope with it. And those kind of experiences are... And someone did recently kill themselves because of a Twitter pylon, which was in the news. So it can happen. So, it's tough. But you've just got to carry on and, get tougher, I suppose, like Neil says.
Do you know that... I was going to say that you've just raised a very interesting issue of social media. It was quite tough for us at the turn of the century, shall we say. How we would have survived if social media had been around, I don't know. Because we would have had the most god-awful...
Well, we'd have exploited it, I think. That's the answer to that, isn't it? Same as we did with making a career in television. Because actually, when people see you on the screen, they can form their own judgment of you, what sort of character you are. Whereas if they've just seen your face on a photograph in a newspaper or some propaganda piece on television about you, but not actually seeing you yourself, then you don't get the opportunity to answer back. And so social media has been a great liberating force, except now, of course, the tech-taters, Facebook and Twitter, are trying to cancel people with unpopular opinions with those of their mindset. There's a different danger again.
Well, you're absolutely right. Just today, LinkedIn are linked with the cancellation of a world-renowned epidemiologist called Martin Kulldorff for his article critical of lockdowns. So I think that's a great description there. Tech-taters, brilliant stuff. Well, if you need support, you can visit the mental health charity Mind at mind.org.uk or call 0300 123 3393. And of course, Samaritans are fantastic as well. Or do pay a visit to your GP. Well, is it a bird? Is it a plane? Well, it's usually a cyclist flying past on the wrong side of your car. But who has right of way at the end of the day? Well, that's not always clear. As of today, the Department for Transport's new highway code comes into force, aimed at clearing all of that up. Some of the key changes include a hierarchy of road users, from pedestrians all the way up to large lorries and trucks. The new code also gives cyclists more rights than ever before, even encouraging them to ride in the centre of the road, which has inspired tonight's Great British Game Show.
Good.
Yes, today's Great British Game Show is a test for you at home and my panel on the highway code, and it's called Highway to Hell. Let's see how you would all fare on the roads this evening, and if you'd be going home with points on your licence. So to play this game of Highway to Hell, we're going to have multiple choice. Each part has a question and a roadside to identify. Let's start. So question number one, who has the right of way at a junction? Is it A, horse riders, or B, cyclists?
Must be horse riders, because they're so slow.
It ought to be horse riders, because aren't we going down from the most protected to the least protected? Is least cyclists, I don't know.
That would be logical, but this is the
cyclists.
new highway
It's
code.
cyclists.
Cyclists. Only pedestrians have priority over them. Question number two, if you're exiting the car from the driver's seat in an English car, which hand should you use to open the door?
Oh, I saw this. It's the opposite hand. It's a new rule. They brought in this opposite hand rule. I don't know quite what it meant.
Your left-hander, should you?
It's the opposite one, that's all I know.
So if you're right-handed, would you open the driver's door with your right hand or your left hand?
Well, I think I'd open it with my right hand.
That's banned now. That's banned.
That's absurd.
There's your 3 points.
But no, it isn't.
No, it's not
just
quite
advisory.
3 points.
Come
It's
on.
advisory, and the idea is so that you then have to turn around and see if there are any cars or cyclists coming in your direction. You're supposed to use your opposite hand to the one you actually use.
I can't
Who knew? The mind boggles. How about question number 3? Could these changes cause more confusion? According to an AA survey, what percentage of people knew about the changes? 70%, 66 or 40?
No. 40. Less, I should think.
Yeah, most of those are lying too.
5%.
Would you believe it's 66? The British public are probably quite dishonest on that one.
Yeah.
And what if you saw this
Like
sign?
asking how many units of alcohol you've drunk this
Yeah,
week.
well, that's well said. What if you saw this sign? We'll finish on this. Take a look at this sign. What does it mean? There it is. What does that sign mean?
An inverted cross, it's something satanic, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The mind boggles. There is no answer. Lots more to come. Headliners is next, thanks to my amazing panel.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking cold and bright to start, before rain and strong winds spread southeastwards later. Let's take a look at the details. A chilly morning across southwest England, with frost to start for some, though it will be dry, and with those clear skies there will be plenty of sunshine around tomorrow. A bright and fine morning for London and the southeast, although it will be rather chilly to start the day with some frost around. Across Wales, it will be a dry start to Sunday with plenty of sunshine around, albeit a little chilly with a frost in places. Zooming into northwest England now, and it will be a dry, bright, but generally a rather chilly morning on Sunday, with plenty of sunshine around and a patchy frost where skies cleared overnight. Moving across the Pennines now into northeast England, and a calmer and drier start to the day tomorrow with light winds and sunny spells, though a cold morning with a frost in places. A generally bright start to Sunday for southern Scotland, though a bit more in the way of cloud in the west. Cold in the east with a patchy local frost. Dry with bright spells for Northern Ireland tomorrow morning. A cold start though, particularly in the east where clear skies remained all night and a frost formed in places. Storm Corrie will move into western Scotland tomorrow morning, bringing strong winds and outbreaks of rain, which will spread southeastwards later.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun